We aren't growing more food. We're growing more commodities. Commodities don't feed people. And the same food system that leaves 1 billion people without food is leaving another 1 billion without the right kind of food. Both are victims of one kind or the other of malnutrition. And this is connected to the ecological crisis. We managed to separate health from food and nutrition, and we managed to separate food from agriculture, and agriculture from the environment. And even though I'm trained as a physicist, I spent such a large part of my life now looking at food and agriculture systems as systems, not as fragments of systems. And I must say, one of the reasons that so many people are going hungry and so many people are diseased because of bad eating is based on a food system that forgot that food was the objective of agriculture. Nourishment is what food should be producing. We've handed over our agriculture to 5 giant seed corporations, the trade to 5 giant grain corporations, the processing to 5 giant processing corporations, and there's an attempt to hand over all retail in the world to 5 giants in the retail sector. The current system is based on monocultures and monopolies, and it's become a system that's very efficient, not in producing food, but in creating waste. Sorry. The first level at which waste is being created is at the level of the industrial food system itself. 10 units of energy go into producing 1 unit of food as energy. And then when we do factory farming, we take that 1 unit of grain that has been produced in a negative economy, feed it to animals and reduce it to 0.1%. 100 units of productive resources and energy are producing just 1 unit of food, when in ecological systems, we can double the output. 100 units will give us 200 units. That's one reason there's hunger, even while ideas of increasing food production are claiming they're producing more food. There's hunger because they're wasted resources. We've wasted our soils. Look at the desertification figures. Look at the land grab that's destabilizing entire continents. A peasant who's lost their land is going to be a hungry peasant. Water, 70% of the water on the planet is misused and abused for industrial agriculture, which then goes to pollute our rivers and oceans, create dead zones for the chemical fertilizers that run off. The UN estimated that 75% of all species in agriculture have disappeared because of industrial farming monocultures. And the studies I've done, as well as the report of the International Commission on the Future of Food, shows that 40% of all climate damage comes from industrial globalized food systems. The Durban meeting that's taking place right now in South Africa will not address food as a major solution if we do it the right way. There's also massive waste in terms of the ecological social capital embodied in millennia of agriculture, 10,000 years of farming, most of it in the hands of women, being wasted today as it's assumed that small farms can be made to disappear. In the US, there are more people in prisons than on the farms. And countries like India want to imitate the US and bring down our farming population from 70% to 2%. That is going to create a deepened food crisis. There's a wastage of knowledge, because in those 10,000 years of evolution, farming communities evolved a lot of knowledge that is today not even being turned to. We have wasted biodiversity. Look at the crops we are not eating. 8,500 species used to feed us. We now grow 4 main commodities: corn, canola, soya, cotton. Monocultures actually produce less, and yet we are made to believe that's the way to produce more food. Land equivalence ratio is higher in mixed farming. On the same unit of land, you get more food when you mix crops. The entire dwarfing technique of the Green Revolution shrunk the food availability, both by making biodiversity disappear and by making biomass disappear, the organic matter that would feed the soil, that would give us food. And one of the technologies that's promoted to feed us is herbicide-tolerant crops. It's creating green deserts. When there is no plant other than the herbicide-resistant soya, you have less food, not more. We are wasting the lives of biodiversity and species. Industrial farming has pushed bees to the colony collapse disorder through the pesticide use and the BT cotton. Rachel Carson wrote her book, Silent Spring, about how pesticides were killing the birds and birds were no more singing. Soil organisms are being finished, but the wasted lives are also the lives of our farmers. India has changed her food system because of globalization. Our seeds are now monopolized by the seed giants who collect royalties, who sell seeds at 8,000% higher cost, leaves farmers in debt, and indebted farmers are drinking pesticides to end their lives. 250,000 Indian farmers have committed suicide in a little over a decade. This is one of the worst genocides in human history. And then we're wasting the lives of the kind of children we saw on screen. We're made to believe that growth creates prosperity. India has high growth, 9%, 8%, but we've become the capital of hunger while we've been growing. Every 4th Indian is today hungry, and every 2nd child is wasted, a nutritional term that talks about children being too thin, too short, to ever become full adults with full human and physical capacity. There is food waste of the kind that an earlier session dealt with Andrew Segre and Jonathan Bloom, both of whose books I've had the privilege to read, who've shown that it isn't local fresh food economies that are wasting food, but the industrial long-distance systems that are wasting 50% of the food, both because of uniformity and because of the long-distance transformation. Gandhi wrote long ago, that he was brilliant. There's no thing he didn't talk about. And he talked about how industrial food processing is a system of turning wealth into waste. If you take a healthy rice and polish it up, you've got rid of its best nutrition. If you take good whole grain and turn it into refined flour, you've turned it into pure starch. You take nice sugar cane, which can give you really good natural sugar, which we make, called gur, and instead turn it into refined sugar. You turn poison for the body and create pollution for the water systems. You can't walk past a sugar factory, it stinks. Refined oil. Refined oil, you burn oil at 400 degrees in solvent extraction plants. And then, at least in India, they tried to make virgin cold-pressed oil illegal. And I had to fight a big battle to keep our mustard oil alive. There's financial waste. $400 billion of subsidies are being spent in the rich countries to distort the farming system, to reward non-sustainable agriculture, to distort the prices so that high-cost production then leads to cheap food and dumping. And Europe will be revisiting its common agriculture policy subsidies. This is a time where the movements for food justice and food sustainability need to get involved to stop the financial waste, especially at a time of deep economic crisis, where countries are being told you can't have a job because we have no money, you can't have a pension because we have no money. It would be interesting to find out how many problems could be solved by just getting rid of subsidies for poisons, for chemicals in agriculture. There is another way. We've been building it, movements around the world have been building it. And that way is based on biodiversity, not monocultures. It's based on ecological systems, not industrial technologies. It's based on decentralization and democracy, not on centralized control in the hands of a handful of giant corporations that have become bad for their own health, for the health of society and the health of the planet, which is why we're getting Occupy movements around the world. We've evolved in Vandana indicators, new indicators, which are not looking at just yield, because yield doesn't tell you whether that commodity will go to run a car as biofuel or will go to torture an animal in a factory farm. It just tells you that's a commodity production. It doesn't tell you what you lost, and it definitely doesn't tell you what it cost to produce that commodity. We are working on health per acre. We're constantly told we don't have enough food, we don't have enough nutrition. I can't take too much time, but let me give you some indicative figures. A biodiverse small ecological farm of the kind we practice produces 344 units of beta-carotene compared to 24 in a chemical farming system. Calcium, so important for children and women, 2,624 units compared to 120. Iron, the most significant deficiency in women and children in the third world, and anemia is the most important reason for maternal mortality. 48 units compared to a pathetic 10. And of course the phosphorus and the magnesium and the potassium, everything else we need, both for the health of the soil, the health of human beings, and the health of the planet. Our data shows on real farms, not fictitious calculations, not projections from petri dishes, and not the luxurious results that come from experimental plots where everything is perfect, the irrigation is perfect, the climate never fails, you never have too little money for the right amount of fertilizer. These are real farms, 200 farms. If agriculture was practiced this way, we could feed 2 Indias. We could feed more than 2 billion people. The United Nations has recognized that agroecological systems can triple food production in the next few years. But for that, we must respect nature, because ultimately the capital for food production is nature's wealth of soil, biodiversity, water, and the sunshine. And we must respect the producers. The abuse of farmers, in my view, is one of the most violent thoughts and actions that has taken place in the history of industrial agriculture. We have turned farmers into disposable communities at a time when we need to recognize that only farmers produce food. Everyone else can produce a commodity, can produce toxic food, can produce artificial things like high fructose corn syrup that's killing the livers of our babies as if they were alcoholics, because it gives you cirrhosis of the liver. We don't get food out of factories. We get food out of the soil and the loving hands of farmers. And that's why we must put the earth and farmers, small farmers, at the center of a food system. We do that in Vandana. And the beauty of it is that an agriculture that protects the climate is an agriculture that protects biodiversity, is an agriculture that gives a dignified livelihood to farmers, is an agriculture that gets rid of both the malnutrition of those who are hungry and the malnutrition of those who are obese. Most importantly, an agriculture that works with the resources of the earth and the wealth of people and their knowledge is an agriculture that is able to be debt-free and therefore suicide-free. It is an agriculture that shows a way not just out of the ecological crisis and the food crisis. It shows a way out of the economic crisis. We do not have the luxury of letting our future be wasted just because false ideas, inappropriate tools, treating agriculture like war, has suited a very narrow group of people. As Wall Street movements have said, we are the 99%. The 1% has told lies about food and agriculture for too long. Let the 99% speak.